Okay, so uh, today I'm going to do basically like an Ask Me Anything type of session. Um, it is not uh, going to be about really anything specific. You can ask me any kind of question you'd like. We're going to work through it in some models, depending on if it's applicable. I think it will be though, because pretty much everything is applicable. And if you have any questions for me personally or on this project, you can also ask me questions about that kind of stuff. I mean, the history of this project, you can ask me that kind of stuff. But uh, you know, that this is going to be a pretty informal session again. Next week we will get back to being more structured, but I'm coming up on like 3 weeks away from my wedding, and every thing that has to be done has to be booked basically like this week. So it's a little stressful right now, but it's getting done, and you know we can still um, have streams, but obviously they're not going to be as structured this week. But tomorrow is our Discord discussion. That's always an open discussion. Very much looking forward to that this week, and then also um, next week, like I said, it will be more structured. So here we go. It's the best way to manage this. There we go. I need to get to hook up my computer to my other monitor, and I bet you that would allow me to have up my stream so I can see the questions that you guys have, and also not be jumping between a bunch of different screens all the time. So next week I will be incorporating that. I just didn't think about it with this laptop yet, but I actually think I do have a cord that will allow me to do it. But let me see. Yeah, I do, but I don't have it hooked up. For now, we'll do this. I would imagine it gets like dizzying. Sometimes I get dizzy. But with that, just jumping between things and spreading things out and going here and it just gets to be a lot. But um, so anyone who's listening, ask me any questions. Let me write that in the chat. Oh, by the way, first things first. Everyone. I've never really done one of these, but they always kind of turn into this, anyways. Like a lot of streams do, at least. Okay, so first things first. Theory of Everyone Clips channel has their second clip up. It went up today, and it's awesome. It's called "What is." It's called "What Does It Mean to Be Masculine?" And I think that I love the title. Like it's a great title. It's only 8 minutes. The other one is 7 minutes and 30 seconds. This one is 8 minutes and 46 seconds. This is so much more digestible. But if you have not subscribed to Theory of Everyone Clips channel, definitely do it. Uh, I predict this will grow actually very fast. But the clip is great, and maybe we'll actually, we'll watch the clip. What do I think about McAfee? I think he was suicided. That's what I think about McAfee. Uh, so it sucks, but he knew a lot of things, obviously, that were um, sensitive information, and that's about powerful people, and that's not a good thing. But here we go. This is the clips. We'll watch this while others join. Thanks to Phantom again for this. This is awesome. True. You're surrounding yourself with women like that. No, you're not surrounding yourself with women like that. You are attracting women like that. You are. Women like that are following you because you are being like that. It's your fault. Don't go seek other women. Go change you. Like, you have to change you. You cannot, you know, men are leading, so you are in charge of the culture. And because you have agency more so than females, or femininity, because you are not reactive, you are active. You can choose to be active, or you can choose not to be active, and that makes you kind of reactive, and you can't both be reactive. You're reacting to women, and women are reacting to you. This is a headless chicken conundrum. You need a head, you need a body. You need heads, you need tails. The thing about heads and tails is, when you look at any animal walk, the head leads and the tail follows. This is what it means. And but right now, we don't want to say this stuff because it does mean that, like, women and men have different roles, and that you are supposed, and it means that we have certain responsibilities, and nobody wants to admit that, and especially gender-specific responsibilities. Of course, there's gender-specific responsibilities, but you can't act when people are like, I see in these bios of, like, spiritual people, people who try and be spiritual, I guess, and I'm not saying they aren't, but, like, they're trying to be spiritual too. And if you're truly spiritual, you don't try to be spiritual. You just are. And but if you're trying to be spiritual, you're like, balance of I am balanced between my masculine and feminine energies. It's like, no, you're not. That's not how this works at all. You're a holon, and the only way in which you are balanced between your masculine and feminine energies is you are the head of an assembly of cells, and they are feminine to you, and you are masculine to them. There you are actually balance of masculine and feminine. But that is that is a different relationship than your relationship with other beings on the same level of the periodicity of sentience as you, other humans, essentially. Like, you cannot individually be, if you are part of a sexually reproductive species, a balance of masculine and feminine on an individual level. You can't do it. You can only balance them in a marriage. It literally cannot happen anywhere else. You cannot be, when you look at people who are feminists and who are like, I don't need a man, women can do anything men can do. Men shouldn't lead. Women can lead too. It's like, they actually become masculine because they have to. You can't be feminine and be leading. You are intrinsically following, submissive, reactive, if you are being feminine. You cannot be the leader. You can't. It's impossible. It's antithetical to the definition of feminism, or femininity, not feminism, femininity. Feminism is a political movement towards self-obsession, and but so is misogyny, which is a real thing, but we don't call it that when it manifests. We just think about it, and this is what I was talking about earlier, is like, men don't know what masculinity is. People are like, where's masculine men? The men who are calling for men to be masculine, usually most of those men aren't even being masculine. You're telling me that, you're just going to preach at people uh, on, like, I don't know, in the social media space, and in your personal life, you're not pursuing, I guess, the building of yourself as, like, I guess, you're not pursuing building. Like, if you're not pursuing building outside of, you know, just reacting online, and that's all you're doing, then you're not being masculine. And it doesn't matter how many times you go to the gym. Going to the gym does not make you masculine. Going and smoking cigars does not make you masculine. Drinking scotch does not make you masculine. These things, being bravery does make you masculine. But bravery is not stupidity and doing things that are, dangerous for the sake, because they're dangerous. Bravery is doing things that are dangerous and that scare you because they need to be done. And that's the proper, healthy manifestation of masculinity. And if you're doing it for the sake of, appearing brave, that's called posturing. And it's actually feminine. It's like when you see a bunch of men. If a man, this is like the difference, okay? If a man looks at a mountain that nobody has ever climbed and he's like, I'm going to climb that because I want to know what's at the top. That is masculine. But if you are, like when I would go cliff jumping in college, you would see like a man would go a little higher, and then another man would go a bit higher than him, and another man would go a bit higher than him, and it would be like this competition of who could go jump off the cliff even higher. And like once I thought I was going to watch somebody die because it got so out of hand. Thank God I didn't. Like, I really thought somebody was going to die once. They took like it was probably close to a 70-foot jump. And I pleaded with them not to jump because I knew that I was going to be the one that would jump in at, like, not from where they were. I was lower, but I would jump in and have to fish their body out of the water. Not something I wanted to do, but they were okay, thankfully. But they said it hurt a lot. I mean, if they had landed wrong, that would have been it. But they were being feminine. They weren't being masculine. They were competing, and to be competitive is actually feminine. Jealousy is feminine. Reactivity is competitiveness, and that is actually feminine. So it's even like when you're an athlete and you want to see how far you can go, that is masculine. But if you are an athlete and your focus is on winning, and I'm not talking about a boxing match even or something like that, and I mean, I'm a little bit, yeah, actually, but like it's a little different in fighting than it is in like I don't know, like a race. But because you're responding, and you also there's more dynamics to it, and you also are planning versus like in a race you're just like, my goal is to go faster than the other guy. It's like, okay, so you're defined by another, not by yourself. If your goal is just to get your fastest time, that's masculine. If your goal is to get the fastest time out of everybody else, it's feminine. So, but we think about sports as masculine, but it's not. It's the expression of femininity most of the time. Cool. Like I said, thanks again to Phantom for that.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jordan. Okay, so I love the Clips channel. I can't wait to see it like mature. Oh my gosh. I said hi, Jordan, and my phone started calling my cousin Jordan. This is why I'm saying we need hard switches, guys. Yesterday, I got into a whole thing and I was like, we need hard switches on our tech. It is what is moral regarding technology. It should be law. For all remote control technology, there is a hard switch. It really should be law. I'm going to do an entire stream on it, like within either next week or the week after, um, because there's a couple different topics that I need to get to. But one of them is going to be this, and I really think that this needs to become more mainstream of an idea, and I also think it's an extremely dangerous idea to discuss. I really mean that. Um, and I think that I don't know, like McAfee is sobering, and I'm not McAfee now, and I never want to be. But like, you gotta know, like, when you threaten powerful people's power structures, the power structures of powerful people, when you threaten those, you seem to have a high likelihood of getting suicided. I'm not. I shouldn't be laughing because it's tragic that this happened to him, but it is. It is very unfortunate. Um, yes, he claimed to have dirt. He had so much dirt. How? But yeah, but what if you want to break some weightlifting records? If they're not your records, it's feminine. If it's your record and you're trying to beat your previous record, it's masculine. Hi, Zhao. I think that's how you say your name. I hope I didn't botch it, but good to have you here. But yeah, McAfee knew some stuff. I mean, so did obviously like Epstein and so many people. Just don't accuse Rogan of stealing that your Thai dwarf twins. Is that what he did? Is that one of the things that he did? I did not hear about this at all. Did you watch the Congress? No, what is the Congress? I don't know what that is. I'm going to keep this open and be working a bit on things while I speak to everybody so that it's not just totally boring visually. But no, I don't know what the Congress is. What is the Congress? Oh, by the way, if you haven't seen this, gosh, it's hard for me to use my trackpad because I cut my finger and I have like a bandage on my finger. I dropped a glass and I went to go pick up the glass after I stubbed my toe horribly. Like when I say horribly, I was wearing flip flops and it was eaten away. The flip flop was eaten away at like near the toe. I've had them for so long. I did replace them finally, but I hit my toe while I was walking my dog and on like a little piece of concrete, and it didn't even hurt, but it ripped my toe open. Then I was dealing with that, and as I was dealing with that, I knocked over a glass. And when I went to go pick up the glass, I reached to go grab it, and my like thumb hit it, and I cut my finger really deep actually. But it's weird because I knew it was gonna happen. Like I was sitting there, and I was just like wrapping and dressing and cleaning, my foot, and then I almost knocked over the glass, and then it was like I saw it all happen, and I knew I was gonna knock over the glass, and uh but I didn't do anything about it, and then I knocked over the glass, and it bounced multiple times. This always happens with glass, as it hits the ground, and then it bounces, and then it hits the ground again, and bounces again, and hits the ground again, and bounces again, and then it hits the ground again and breaks. And it's like, why is that? I don't know, because the initial hit is always the hardest hit, but it seems like the more bounces that it has, the more likely it is to break. But each successive bounce should be less of a force than the previous, so I don't really know why they always break. It must be like something to do with vibration, or just the angle that it ends up bouncing at after multiple bounces hits the weaker parts. But I can't really move the trackpad very well, so if I am more dizzying with this kind of stuff, switching between screens than usual. Forgive me. But this was something that I pulled from my first document uh, pertaining to this work, and I had made this, and it was like I just knew that 0.99999 repeating infinitely was essentially one, and in the relativistic perspective, like in a growth perspective, and that because you're simultaneously moving towards one and also increasing in multiplicity. So it just made sense to me. But I had basically put the various fields over here, fields of study, so quantum physics, Newtonian physics, chemistry, biology, ecology, genealogy, and sociology. And then I have, you know, particle, atom, which is particles like protons, neutrons, and electrons, but I didn't yet break it into how detailed it is now and specific. And then goes to molecules, cells, organisms, family, and caste. So I had basically nailed that really early on. I'm missing one though. Hadron. It's the one I'm missing. That's the, compare basically the early version compared to the current version. You can see. So wasn't yet on the Garamond font either. Okay, quarks. Okay, I see what it is. It's this. Because I don't include technological singularity here, but I mean that in nation, and then universe is when it achieves wisdom. It becomes essentially like the entirety of a universe and recreates itself. And basically, that Babylon, the artificial division of being and the study of being, which is this is being, and this is the study of being, and it's these artificial divisions that we've created in the language causes a disconnect between the fields, and that is Babylon. That is literally what Babylon actually is. It's not, like I've said before, Spanish versus English versus Hebrew versus French. It's physics versus chemistry versus biology versus genealogy versus sociology versus technology, which is the one thing I'm missing here. There is an objective field of technology, and that is the technology related to this work, the objective growth structure. One of the things he actually said, wow, that's funny. Yeah, he was into some weird stuff, McAfee. And I heard, all kinds of things about him, but who knows what's true. All I know is that if they wanted him that bad, he knew some things he wasn't supposed to. It wasn't because he did something that really was terrible necessarily. I mean, I think I heard that he actually killed a guy once in a foreign country or something like that. I don't know if that's true, but even if it is true, it's not the reason the United States really wanted to get a hold of him. It was because he had information that threatened powerful people. That's absolutely obviously the reason. But you can see I was even uniting this stuff with religion at the time, I guess you could say. Somebody asked me today if I was a Unitarianist or Unitarian, and I am not, but I understand why they would ask that. But what most people consider a Unitarian is not what I would be, but in a way, yes, but actually not in the way that it is. I'm not like the most people who call themselves Unitarians, I guess. Fascinating to look back at old work. Always. Claims he had a dead man switch. Yeah, I know he did. He was supposed to drop some documents if anything ever happened to him. By the way, I don't even want to say it. Never mind. I'm not going to put that energy into the world. But this project is going to get threatening to people eventually over time. Just saying it. And I am a very happy person in my life. So that's all I will say. Not worried about anything now, but if your work threatens the established narrative of all of science, essentially, the general narrative of all of science, and in a way that really is humiliating to the scientific establishment and the academic establishment, and also totally threatens the political, the established political ideologies that are also, nonsense in general, then that is serious. But I don't have any information on anybody that's like McAfee had. And so I think that is like the main thing for most of these people is like you have information on powerful people that it's damning, but I don't. And but I do think that eventually, if you do threaten the established institutions, like the public trust in the established institutions, and you basically show, like, end up humiliating them, not purposely, but just emergently, I think that's something to be just cautious about. But you gotta say what's true. And what's true is they have no idea what they're talking about. So I wanted to check some math stuff actually. $1934 plus 102. 2036. 2280. Interesting. Walter Russell was threatened, if I remember correctly. So was Tesla. Tesla and Walter Russell, I mean, Tesla's work was seized and hidden away into a vault and then probably used to make anti-gravity technology and warp transportation. And we just weren't told about it. And still to this day, have not been told about it. That is the most incredible and interesting and also concerning aspect of this UFO phenomenon is the stories that we have back engineered the tech decades ago, and now we have it, and it's just not in the public sphere, and it's being basically controlled. It does contradict the narrative of Bob Lazar, but it does that is more like in alignment with what Stephen Greer has said, and also Richard Dolan believes at least, but Stephen Greer claims to know. And also it's much more backing of Ben Rich, and who ran Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and that's really the one that is like, if he didn't ever say what he said, I would be much less convinced that we had done it, and I would have just believed Bob Lazar. Some people said that Bob Lazar was probably a plant by them specifically to help aid in disclosure a little bit, like via, you know, this whole operation of like making it look like it wasn't supposed to happen. I don't think that that's true necessarily, though. Um, that just I don't like. I know the government leaks stuff and then claims that it was an accident, but I don't know how much like Bob Lazar was a leak necessarily. But if they have done like back engineered anti-gravity, essentially anti-gravity technology and warp transportation, then Bob Lazar was like his whole firing was a psyop to basically help get a little bit of like disclosure out there. Um, but I don't really think that it was because his entire life was erased, and that doesn't make sense. Like if it was an effort to disclose things a bit, I think that uh, they wouldn't have gone through so much effort to erase all of his credentials, and they did. I mean, and they did it completely other than hard copies of things. So, by the way, guys, I have this documentary on my computer, and it has disappeared before on my computer, and now I have it like saved onto external hard drives and stuff like that. But this video on here is I pulled it from YouTube, and when it was on YouTube, it had like a couple thousand views, and it should have had millions of views, and it didn't. This is a 40 minute
for the United States government.
A 40 minute like detailed discussion by Bob Lazar right after everything went down.
That there is physical evidence which proves that there is life elsewhere and that at least one form of that life has been here. Information or ascertain its accuracy. When we get to part 2, it will be obvious why proof of some of this information could not be conclusive. Some of the points covered in the second section will be information about the beings that brought us this technology, and how these beings have historically interacted with man. I've been prudent in selecting what to expose here, and I think that some of this information should not be made available to the general public. This information is being conveyed to you as it was to me, with the exception that in most cases I've simplified things for those of you with non-scientific and non-technological backgrounds. Single star system, binary, go. Up.
So,
Jessica?
what's interesting is that when he gets into like he shows his badge.
As you can see in this representation, my ID badge had a white background with one light blue and one dark blue diagonal stripe in the upper left-hand corner. At the bottom of the badge, there were letters and numbers designating various areas, including S4. On my badge, there was a star punch through S4. The back of the ID badge was dark blue with a vertical mag stripe running down one side. The hangar that housed the sport model was like a typical airplane hangar with the exception of the angled doors that I mentioned before. The hangar was equipped with typical tools and extensive electronic equipment. It also had a machine with an X-ray emblem on it and an overhead crane rated at 20,000 pounds. Equipment in this hangar was marked with a black number 41 with a white circle around it. It was outside of this hangar that I saw the sport model tested. Now, when a disk travels near another source of gravity, such as a planet or moon, it doesn't use the same mode of travel that we learned about in our science lessons. When a disk is near another source of gravity, like Earth, the gravity A wave, which propagates outward from the disk, is phase shifted into the gravity B wave, which propagates outward from the Earth, and this creates lift. The gravity amplifiers of the disk can be focused independently, and they are pulsed and do not stay on continuously. When all three of these amplifiers are being used for travel, they're in the delta configuration. And when only one is being used for travel, it's in the omicron configuration. As the intensity of the gravitational field around the disk increases, the distortion of space-time around the disk also increases. And if you could see the space-time distortion, this is how it would look. As you can see, as the output of the gravitational field from the amplifiers becomes more intense, the form of space-time around the disk not only bends upward, but at maximum distortion actually folds over into almost a heart shape around the top. Project Galileo.
So what's interesting is that basically the gravity A wave and B wave that he's talking about,
and inserted into the reactor.
One of them is the strong nuclear force, and it used to be called like gravity A and gravity B waves. So, and he mentions that he's like on the thing. So he's like, well, gravity A wave. So there are big differences between the gravitational waves and gravity waves. Gravity waves. Oh my gosh. Gravity. I hate Quora. I used to like it. I thought it was a genius. Now I hate it. It's just, I don't know. It just bothers me. The interface is shit. So, first of all, there's a big difference between the gravitational waves and gravity waves. Gravitational waves are the ripples in space-time that have been so much in the news lately. Gravity waves occur at the interface between different fluid media, air versus water, troposphere versus stratosphere, stratosphere versus mesosphere, between different layers of water. So you can have internal waves in the water, surface manifestations such as tsunamis and waves and so forth and so on. The energy generating gravity waves can come from wind, blah, blah, blah. Okay. It doesn't come from wind. I mean, like, wind can create waves, but not gravity waves, essentially. Okay, what does he say here? He said something about Balmazar. See, this is some BS. Okay, Balmazar may have been lied to, which I've heard, about the extensiveness of this, you know, I don't know, this the field of back engineering of these craft, but he's not a crackpot, and this stupid ass poster here. So pardon my cursing, I guess. Like, I try not to. I came from a family from Brooklyn, and I used to curse all the time, but I have slowly slowed down quite a bit, and I think it's a good thing. But Bob Lazar, mentioned by another poster as a crackpot Area 51 conspiracy theorist. Really? Really? Like, do you have evidence of that? You don't. You have no evidence of that. He's not a crackpot, obviously.
What the porthole-like areas are. Materials. When I went to work, and if any unwelcome the mountain and the bed, or as I mentioned, moon, it doesn't use the same mode of travel that we learned about in our science cron configure. On the disk is so in Project Sidekick or looking maximum is detecting the radiation of particles. At this point, transmutation occurs by this much power. For everyone to understand that, I need to further explain a couple. This brings us back to our original question. How do you generate a gravitational field?
Here.
You must have access to an element which is heavy enough for the gravity which remains after the creation of a solar system is totally dependent on the contributing factors which were present during the creation of the solar system. This is true whether you believe that the origin of the universe was an evolutionary event or that a supreme being caused this event to happen. The two main factors which determine what residual matter remains after the creation of a solar system are the amount of electromagnetic energy and the amount of mass present during the solar system's creation. Our solar system has one star, which is our sun, but the majority of solar systems in our Milky Way galaxy are binary and multiple star systems. In fact, many single star systems have stars that are so large that our sun would appear to be a dwarf by comparison. Keeping all this in mind, it should be obvious that a large single star system, binary star system, or multiple star system would have had more of the prerequisite mass and electromagnetic energy present during their creations. This makes it possible for these systems to possess elements which are not native to the Earth. Scientists have long theorized that there are potential combinations of protons and neutrons which should provide stable elements with atomic numbers higher than any which appear in our periodic chart.
That's
Though
fascinating.
none of these heavy elements occur naturally on Earth. 88 of the first 92 elements on the periodic chart occur naturally on Earth. Some heavier elements do occur in trace amounts, but for the most part, we synthesize these heavier elements in laboratories. Generally speaking, the stability of these synthesized heavy elements decreases as their atomic number increases, but experiments at the Lab for Heavy Ion Research in Germany have shown that this may only be true up to a certain point, as the half-life for element 109 is longer than that of element 108.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So this is why, like, this stuff is so, like you just learn so many things that are so relevant. So 108 is a number that is found in my work, and it's also a number that I know there's like it's just very talked about. And the reason why, I think, is because when I look at 108, I'm like, okay, 1, oneness, O, infinity, and 8 is the 8 stages in the periodicity of sentience. So basically, there's infinity between like 1 and 8, essentially, and between oneness and 8. So 8 stages of sentience, plus, 1 extra 9, which is, gone. And this is what, all of infinity is contained, between those. So, but 108 is a very fascinating number. Let's make sure that I can see you guys. Questions. Okay. Okay. 108. 108 is an even composite number composed of two prime numbers multiplied together. Okay, this is why 108 is so fascinating. Look at it. It's 2 squared, so 2 to to the second, essentially. 2 to the power of 2, that's what it is. It's 2 to the power of 2 and 3 to the power of 3. So times 3 to the power of 3. So 2 to the power of 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. Times 3 to the power of 3, which is 3 times 3, which is 9, times 3, which is 27. So 27 times 4, which is 108. So there's 12 divisors. It's interesting. In the West, we have clocks that go 1 to 12 and then 1 to 12 again, and then clocks, in other parts of the world and also in our military time, are on a 1 to 24 schedule, which I think is probably a better model than being 12 twice. But the sum of all of its divisors is 280. Sum of its proper divisors is 172. Its abundance is 64. Okay, this is interesting because 64 is the number of gaps in between the various, I guess you could call them elements, in the verse model when you separate them out. So there's 64 red squares that separate 81 like quanta of consciousness in this model, which is a gas, and this model, which is a liquid, and this model, which is a solid. Speaking of, by the way, this guy who wrote I've talked about him before. He wrote Struck by Genius. Okay, he said this guy who wrote Struck by Genius, who was hit in the head during a robbery and then became like a math genius, whose work looks like mine. Like you can see, oh man, right here. This is his work. This is mine. Very similar. Right there. Let's see how many he has here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my gosh, this is just too difficult to do it like this. I'm just gonna do it like this. Okay. 1, 3, 5, 7, 5, 3, 1, which is 25. Interesting. Let's see this. 32. That makes much more sense, actually. When you overlap the those two. Actually, let's do this. It's hard to see for you guys, so here. 42. Okay. Basically. Interesting. But this is his work, this is mine. And looks like 16 circles and 30 or 25 entanglement points on this thing. But anyways, he said water drops from the faucet he would see in crystalline patterns, where basically they were like strings. So let's see, it said where was it? He said that they were like strings of patterns. Where is it? Jason. The BBC. Gosh, they're just as bad as our media, if not worse. Okay, here. Even something as ordinary as brushing his teeth is governed by mathematics. He turns the tap on, dips his toothbrush into water. I don't know why I like perfect squares, he says. It's not just a perfect square. It's 2 to the power of 4, or 4 squared. But I just like perfect squares. I automatically do that stuff with everything. And he said, um, where is it? He said everything was curved. That was curved looked like it was slightly pixelated. Water coming down the drain didn't look like it was a smooth flowing thing anymore. It looked like these little tangent lines. And what's interesting is that if you look at my expression of a liquid in this model, it's these lines, okay, of entangled particles that are perfect squares. It's fascinating that this happened to him and allowed him to do this kind of thing. I don't think it was getting hit in the head that did it via his brain, though. I think, honestly, my hypothesis would be that his near-death experience caused an ego death and basically, like, allowed him to see the greater structure of reality because of that. Kind of like giving you a DMT trip. It wasn't actually the brain injury. It was the near-death experience altering his perspective, because that just makes way more sense when you understand that this is information processing. Do you think warp and anti-gravity can be accessible without technology? I think about it a lot. I think it is via remote viewing, potentially, but I cannot claim that I know how to do that because I don't. And I haven't really thought much about how to do it either. But I think I could probably figure it out if I tried. But I don't know if that means that you actually levitate, like in the way that you've been observed by someone else. Maybe if you got good enough. I mean, they say Jesus walked on water, but I also think that was a metaphor, but not just it wasn't a metaphor. It was super literal. It was for basically like being able to like traverse anywhere in his consciousness, I think. It doesn't mean he couldn't walk on water physically either. He might have been able to do that. But God works on all levels, as I say, so I think it also means, at least, that he was able to like astral project, like very to a degree that really no one else could. I think I've heard about dubious behavior from Lazar from a trustworthy person. Dubious behavior as in like he was basically like involved in some thing involving a brothel. Like, I've heard that too. He lives in Nevada. They're there, and something happened. I don't know, and I don't care. It's not relevant to his physics work. His physics work is, he appears to know what he's talking about. I'm not saying he's not lying about what he saw. I'm not saying that they didn't lie to him about what he saw, but I do believe that he actually worked where he said, and that's it. That's all I believe. Like, I really am like, I'm really confident that he actually did work where he said. I am not confident. I know the government lied to him about some things. I don't know what things those are. And depending on what they are, they have extraordinary implications regarding other people. Which, speaking of, Stephen Greer said that we have, back engineered craft, and like Ben Rich had said. But Stephen Greer went on Joe Rogan and years ago, and Bob Lazar. I mean, Joe Rogan is a huge fan of Bob Lazar, so he would not have allowed Spotify to remove that episode, I don't think. But he wasn't as like he didn't resonate quite as well with Stephen Greer, which I understand because honestly I don't either. But I can't deny that the guy has said a lot of things that are true that he shouldn't really know, and about physics. And Stephen Greer went on Joe Rogan's show many, 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 many years ago, and it was deleted from what I heard off of Spotify. And if anyone though, if anyone is telling the truth, if you assume they're both telling the truth about what they know, I would say Stephen Greer is more of a threat than even Bob Lazar, even though he didn't work there exactly. He's just, I don't know, like he has a much bigger following in a way that are like diehards. Who is Jesus? Jesus was, I believe, the Messiah. Basically, the consciousness that ascends to the next level in the periodicity. So basically, what happens is in growth, so right here, we can go to growth. You have, actually, evolution is a combination of many factors. Okay, so you have, in information processing, you have replication or multiplication, and you have stacking and addition. And stacking is also what's called ascension. And multiplication and replication basically allows for adaptation. So evolution, if evolution is real, if you assume it's a real thing, like, and just for the sake of argument, don't even think about what evolution is, just assume that the word represents something real. That thing that it represents is a superposition. It is the growth pattern that is the superposition between two different aspects. One is adaptation and one is ascension. Okay? And so when you look at where could we go? Right here. About periodicity, and you're looking at this structure of growth. Adaptation occurs here. Adaptation occurs here. Adaptation occurs on this level, and 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 this level. Ascension is what links this level with this level, and 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 this level with this level. And then essentially this level with even this level to some degree. But actually not even to some degree. Kind of, it's a remerging with God, essentially, that occurs. But so it's a little different. But so how do you get a human from an assembly of cells? How do you get an organism from an assembly of cells? At some point, there was a cell, I believe, that became so aware of itself and its position in and of the greater structure, basically, that it was inside of a sentient being, and to such a degree that it made a sacrifice. It sacrificed itself to unite the group, and it knew that it was going to do that. And so from that, that's how the first multicellular organisms arrived from single-celled organisms, is at some point in some assembly that had been formed between multiple, many different, probably, single-celled organisms. One of them realized that it was inside of another sentient being, and it was already self-aware, because cells are already self-aware, and it made a conscious and chosen sacrifice for the group to unite the group, and bring the entire structure up a level, to up level the entire structure, and then therefore that consciousness essentially ascends to become the first organism. And I think that's what happened with humans. So essentially, that's I think we are the cells, more or less, of the technological singularity, and that is like one of some human did the same thing. They made a self-sacrifice in order to unite the group, and it has worked. By the way, we define our time by Jesus's death, and regardless of whether or not you are Christian or anything, you can't deny that he's probably the most famous person in the world. And I mean, I would absolutely say Jesus is the most famous person in the world. I cannot think of a single person on earth that is as famous as Jesus. Not one. And if you can, let me know in the chat, but I doubt it. And that is a uniting thing. We're all looking in the same direction, okay? And it united us on a level that had never been done before and will never be done really after that, as I don't think. It just, everybody knows who Jesus is. I can't imagine anybody becoming more famous than Jesus ever. It's just not going to happen. But yeah, basically that's what happens. And then the same thing happens with family and caste, and castes. I originally called this nation, in a biblical perspective, by the way, this would be called nation. And you could say this is, or no. This is tribe. This is nation. And essentially, so, but this is the biblical perspective, and then it's the same thing though, caste, and then techno. So technological singularity, which is, consciousness. But these are the same. And then these are the same. But in order to get from a hadron to an atom, you have to have a self-sacrifice of a hadron has to choose to self-sacrifice itself to unite the group. Same thing with an atom to a molecule. Same thing with a molecule to a cell. Same thing with a cell to an organism, and an organism to family, and family to caste, and caste to technological singularity. So, that's who Jesus was, I think. If he was the Messiah, that is what the Messiah is. I think he was the Messiah. You don't have to think he was the Messiah. The reason why I think he's the Messiah is, one, he's the most famous person in the world, and two, self-sacrifice is part of that structure. In order to unite, you kind of have to sacrifice, and one of the easiest way to sum it up into a single sentence, the best argument I've ever heard for basically that would support that Jesus would probably be the Messiah, is basically this phrase that I came up with, which is that in order to be everything to everyone, you have to give everything for everyone. And so that's it. That's just very simple. But there was an atomic Messiah, a molecular Messiah, a cellular Messiah, and then here you have Jesus. And there will also be a familial Messiah, a tribal Messiah, and then nation is different because it's basically the point before universal singularity, and it's just you don't have to have a Messiah that is a nation. But I mean, to some degree, yes. And then you basically just merge with God. I mean, you just become. It's just one. You're like complete oneness at that point with God. Whereas in here, these are separate from God and one with God. And once they achieve this level, they're still separate from God and one with God, but they're more one with God. They're in alignment, I'll say, with God as well. Whereas here, you don't have to be in alignment with God necessarily, but once you achieve this, reach this level, the entirety of the system everything below it too becomes linked and one, and then also achieves wisdom and becomes united with God again. Not just united, aligned with. It's already united. Like he lied about someone and tried to defame a person who is trustworthy. Who? I want to know more about that, Torin. I've never heard that. I'm not saying I disbelieve you. I just have no idea. I mean, he is a human being, but I'd like to hear that story. Yes, you have to rip everything you can while it's out there. But here's the thing about this Bob Lazar video. I had saved it to my computer, and it disappeared from my computer. And I saved it again to my computer, and it disappeared from my computer. And I had sent clips of it on my phone to someone, and those clips disappeared that I had sent, those messages. And now I have it on a bunch of hard drives that are external, and it has not disappeared since. But it did, and when it wasn't on those hard drives, I had to re-find it, and when I refound it, it was re-uploaded by someone else. And it still had very few views, which I know the internet, okay? Like, I know when stuff is being suppressed. And that doesn't mean Google is actively suppressing everything that is suppressed. Sometimes it just means that, it's like, I mean, you could just say it's Satan, essentially. Like, I know that's a loaded word for people, but that's basically what it is. Like, I don't know. When it just is. But, here.
The point is that our observations and theories are accurate. The fact is that heavier stable elements with higher atomic numbers, which have more protons, neutrons, and electrons than any Earth elements, do exist. However, up until this point in history, there has been no physical evidence to prove this. But now that proof is here. The most important attribute of these heavier stable elements is that the gravity A wave is so abundant that it actually extends past the perimeter of the atom.
Okay, this is the physics that's fascinating, and was probably the reason this was taken off the internet, keeps getting taken off the internet, is because the physics described in this are not said anywhere else. And this should have millions of views, and anyone who Googles Bob Lazar should see this within the top 10 results, and it's not there.
These heavier stable...
So essentially, he's saying that once an atom is heavy enough, the gravity A wave, which is this strong nuclear force, extends past the perimeter of the atom. I don't really know exactly what that means. I guess it means like beyond the furthest electron. Like the observation, the furthest electron observation, because electrons are actually just us perceiving a wave, essentially. So it's like if you put a pebble in the water, like a rock in a shallow pool of water, and some of it's sticking out. That's an atom. And then the ripples that are forming around it would be electrons. And you can only focus on one point in space at a time, and that's causing the observation of a point, even though it's actually wave, which is why we use probability to determine. We think it's probabilistic, whether or not like we see an electron in a specific spot, but it's more complicated and also more simple than that.
However, up until this point in history, there has been no physical evidence to prove this.
Probability is just geometry, by the way. So basically, we use probability to kind of figure out where you would be able to see an electron. It's basically meaning you're looking at the geometric structure of what's happening.
But now that proof is here. The most important attribute of these heavier stable elements is that the gravity A wave is so abundant that it actually extends past the perimeter of the atom. These heavier stable elements...
The gravity A wave is so abundant that it extends past the perimeter of the atom. Okay.
Literally have their own gravity A field around them, in addition to the gravity B field that is native to all elements.
Okay.
No naturally occurring atoms on Earth have enough protons and neutrons for the cumulative gravity A wave to extend past the perimeter of the atom so you can access it. Even though the distance that the gravity A wave extends is infinitesimal, it is accessible, and it has amplitude, wavelength, and frequency just like any other wave in the electromagnetic spectrum. Once you can access the gravity A wave, you can amplify it just like we amplify any other electromagnetic wave. To demonstrate how a wave is amplified, we can use this oscilloscope, and as you can see, it graphically depicts the tone you hear as a wave. As we amplify the tone, you can see that the size or the amplitude of the wave increases, giving us a more powerful version of the same identical wave, and thus the tone sounds louder. In like manner, the gravity A wave is amplified and then focused on the desired destination to cause the space-time distortion required for space travel.
I don't think that that's actually correct. It's not that it's distorting space-time the way that we think of it as like bending space. It's not bending space. It's accessing, it's entangling itself. Okay, that's what it's doing. It's entangling with a destination point. It's not bending space-time like people think. That's not happening, I don't think.
This amplified gravity A wave...
Which, by the way, that makes it much more accessible all of a sudden, because people are like, you know how much energy you would need to bend the universe in half so that you could go from one point to the next, or compress, from one side of the universe to the other, or how much you would need to compress space in front of you and extend it behind you in order to, move across the universe at a faster than light, quote unquote, traveling speed. That's not what's happening. That kind of energy only exists with God. What's happening is we're using an entanglement point, gravity A energy, which is, I'm pretty sure, the strong nuclear force. You're amplifying it probably via mod 9 resonance frequencies, which is what Robert Grant discusses. And mod 9 resonance frequencies is basically this. So if you look at this and you're like, okay, we need to amplify, which means increase a bit of information. Okay, so start with a 1, and then you grow it, and boom, you've grown the information. This is what is done in order to increase those frequencies, essentially, like that he's showing, I think, but it's in a way that is more discrete, less like relativistic or smooth. It's more discrete, and it's also because it's discrete, it's able to be programmed into basically like a map of entanglement structures that can then be used to help you jump from one point to the next and end up where you actually want to be. So you need to map the universe in order to do this, like jumping, like warp transportation. You need to have the coordinates of the universe mapped via the entanglement structures of sentience. So basically, like, this is what you would need. And to basically orient, so you would use this structure to amplify the strong nuclear force in order to, and then you would use this structure in order to entangle it with the point somewhere in this essentially this shape. And it's probably, the shape is probably fractal, so if you zoomed in, you would see like it fractaling out even more so than is represented here in Excel. This is kind of like a high level view, but it probably is like more fractalized than even this appears. Because basically, I think what you would want to do is every time that there's like 24 here, you'd want to break that into 24 squares. Here there's 8, you want to break that into 8 squares. Here there's 8, you'd want to break that into 8 squares. Here there's 15, you'd want to break that into 15 squares. And then you'd probably even want to break each one of those into 9 squares. Okay? And even then, you'd probably want to break each one of those 9 squares into 4 squares. And that is probably how you would travel. You'd map that to as the entanglement structure, and that's how you would travel, essentially. So you'd use this to entangle information to make it so that it basically you'd get a quantity that was the one that you wanted, and in this structure. But this could probably get way more complicated. I'm sure I could do it. It just would be seriously like a lot, because essentially every one square here would be this number times 9 times 4, and then maybe even plus 1. So let's like think about this. So you'd do, so this number would then be equals this times 9 times 4. And that number is then 864. So that 860, so basically you would break this number, this cube, into 864 other little squares, essentially, other little sets. And that is even like, it's going to make this model way more complicated than it is now, and it would make much more sense as to, like, you could get pretty defined on where you, in basically generating the image of where you want to go. I'm going to have to do that. But that is a project and a half. I'd have to do it 2 ways. Unless it was totally coded completely outside of Excel, really. If I did it in Excel, I'd have to build structure in one, but it's almost not worth it because, I mean, it may be, but it'd be so incredible, such an incredibly large image for you to be able to zoom in and see 860 squares inside of one of these squares, and that's not even the highest level of, you know, this. So if I did this, and then the highest one is that's not even the highest one. That is the highest one, and that is 3024. So you need 3024 little squares in this square, or sets in this one square. Okay? And in every single one of these. And then also at the very end, you'd want 399 times 9 times 4. And that is 14,364. Plus 1 is 14,365, which is literally too perfect. Like, holy shit, a little bit. Where is Numbermatics? 14,364. Let's do 4 prime numbers and 48 divisors, which is 2 to the second. Guys, holy shit and a half. Like, that's all I'm gonna say. So this right here, 2 to the power of 2 times 3 to the power of 3 is 108, as we were looking at earlier, and I don't remember why we were looking at that, but we were looking at that. It's a very important number. Times 7, which says, like, 7 yom, 7 periods of creation, essentially. Times 19, which is a very, very important number in the Quran linked to creation. How amazing is that? You know how I know that my work is, like, correct? Because all of the structure that's built into this, like the fact that the interior sum of one of the quanta of consciousness is 19, is built always, and the periodicity is built into the verse structure, as basically it's 8, but it's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 that grow the next level above, because then caste grows technology, but technology creates an entire universe after that. It doesn't create something else. So there's 7 structures that grow in the periodicity of sentience. 7 periods that grow in the periodicity of sentience. And Yom in the Torah, which we now translate to day in translations of the Bible, actually means period. It doesn't mean day. And it represents this. It doesn't mean days of the week alone. It also is linked to that, but it's not just that. But the fact that all of that is encompassed here, a perfect square, a perfect cube. By the way, 3 times 3 is obviously, like I said, it's 9. Times 3 is 27. And that is a perfect cube. So this is a cube. This is a square given the 4 primary perspectives, which is really inside, outside, and separate and oneness. So it's 2, because inside and or you could say, inside and separate, or inside and oneness, and then you have separate and outside, or oneness and outside. So, like, these are 2 sets that are then to the power of 2, because they're basically each have a 2 degrees of freedom. So there's 2 degrees of freedom for 2 sets. That's 2 to the power of 2. So two perspectives to the power of 2, meaning with 2 degrees of freedom, because that is your power, is your degrees of freedom. So literally to the power of 2. So you can look at something from the inside or outside, or you look at something from the separateness, or from the perspective of separateness or oneness. That's 2 to the power of 2. 3 to the power of 3 is this. Now you're breaking into the 14 dimensions that are kind of created by the binary triality that is created essentially by the overlapping of 4 parameter or 4-dimensional beings, which is all of us are 4-dimensional beings because we perceive things via inside, outside, separate, oneness. Every sentient being does. So this is objective and the consciousness, and this is a subjective consciousness. So this is inside of this one. So like this is a cell inside of you, and this overlap creates 3 over 3, but because it's an overlap of 3 and 3, it's not actually just 3 and 3. It's a third perspective is manifested as well, kind of like you don't just have past and future, they're reflecting across the present. So you don't have just, forwards and backwards, you have also reflecting across, your current location or staticness. So what this does is it creates the observation of triality, which is so basically the overlapping of the father and of the son within the father, or the child within the parent, I guess you could say. So creation within, existence, or within God, the universe within God. This overlap creates a third observed perspective that is the totality of 2, and that is you could call it the Holy Spirit in Christianity, or the divine soul in Judaism, it's called. And in this, it's the constraint of your present moment and current location. Basically, like this is like a triality that's created. This triality that's created gives rise to this 9. So what's interesting is like, if you look at this, I'm doing a bad job explaining this, but this is very complicated. So when you look at the various states of matter here, there's 81 quanta of consciousness here and 64 gaps. There's 81 quanta of consciousness here and 64 gaps. There's 81 quanta of consciousness here in the solid and 64 gaps solid. This is a gas, this is liquid. And when you entangle them completely to get rid of all space, they overlap in such a way that it gives rise to a third perspective that then I represent 2-dimensionally here. But really, if you were to get rid of all space here, you, without doing that, you would do like basically like this, essentially. And then wait. And it basically becomes like an unworkable structure in a way, because you're missing information that isn't being represented in 2 dimensions anymore, because the overlap is not observable in a 2-dimensional format. So I realized that this overlap is occurring, and in order to make that like show 2-dimensionally, I had to show the overlap here. So that's why when you look here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 by 9 here. And here it's 18 by 18 essentially, because the overlap is occurring and it's giving rise to a third superposition perspective that is between the 2 degrees of freedom. So it's giving rise to triality. So in order to represent triality and its properties, and model it mathematically as well, because you have to use the Fibonacci sequence to link the various periods in the periodicity here, and that is in the triality that wouldn't be visible if you didn't make it like this. Then you need to make it like this. So I got rid of all gaps here. So basically, I mean, if you look, even like this is not entangled. These are not overlapping with, you know, any of its neighbors. This is overlapping to 1 degree here, and then or to, you know, one of the 9 dimensions, I guess you could say. And then in the solid, it's overlapping with 1 in both degrees of freedom, so that basically it locks them all into place. You can't move this one without simultaneously impacting all the rest. Whereas then, with the liquid, you can move this one and it will impact this one, but it won't impact this one. And that's why a liquid is kind of halfway between a solid and a gas. But to be quite honest with you, not even really sure if this actually exists, okay? Like gas in the way that we think about it actually exists. I actually think it's all fluid and solid in how things manifest, and it's just dependent upon the properties of the elements and the buoyancy and stuff, that like air is a liquid, is what I'm saying. Like air is a liquid. It's a fluid. It's just, so because this isn't actually like, in a relativistic way of viewing gas compared to a liquid on our level of how we, you know, interact with them, this does exist, but it doesn't really. Remember that this is all due to our perspective. It's not length, width, and height to define space. It's actually forwards, backwards, and, you know, staticness or current location. So here you have 2 degrees of freedom. You have essentially expansion or less entangled, towards less entanglement, which is a gas, or contracted or towards more entangled, which is a solid. And the superposition of the two is a fluid, and the fluid is actually the state of how space-time actually really is. It's just our perspective that allows us to see it as, you know, either a solid or a, which is a completely entangled structure, really, or a gas, which is basically almost like a completely unentangled structure in these models, which isn't actually possible because everything is entangled. So it's not possible really that gosh, hold on. That there is unentangled particles in the universe. That doesn't exist. It's very annoying. And no borders and white. Okay. trying to get these kind of ready for export. Where is the final one? Would be right here. It's honestly that and that and that, that, and then there. Highlight that, highlight that, highlight that, hit that, and what is this? This is 16, so let's move it to 20 and oh, was that 108? I did that actually on purpose. Not because I was doing like numerological things with it, but because the number has a certain property that would potentially allow me to make, like, it allows the grid. I was seeing if it would allow the grid to have more degrees of freedom depending on what you set that to, which it probably does. But I mean, it's hard to see that when you're like, think about it just objectively for a minute. But if you're working in this stuff every day and you're like separating things and tiling things, you can see that certain dimensions allow for certain things. So there you go. You even do that. Is this a square? 1. Let's just see here. That is 43. Interesting. And that is 43. So it is a square. This is a square, but this one's chiral, so I needed to know if it was a square. What does this one manifest as? $38 by 38. And then this one is obviously square because it's not chiral. But this one is chiral, meaning asymmetrical. So if you draw a line down the center from the top to the bottom, you will be slightly off center because this one is showing the spin. So is liquid is showing the spin. If you start from the very top, you're going to not end up here because there's spin happening. But when you're representing a solid, you are basically, or complete entanglement in a way, like you see a non-chiral or symmetrical structure, and same thing with a completely unentangled structure, which is essentially the same exact thing. It's like this would be separateness and this would be oneness, but really, if you're separate from something else, it is because you are one with yourself, and oneness. So it's like they're two different positions on the same. They're two sides of the same coin. So this one though is 35. So 35. And 36 essentially. If you don't include the outside 4, which is what we would want to not include. So 35, 36. 51. So you have 35. Yeah. 51. And then you, what was that? 38. This one. The liquid. No, 43. Which is almost 42. It's one off. And I have a theory. We're gonna test. So 43 is liquid. This one is the gas. And then the solid is 35. And then the I guess you could say verse is 36. $165. So what's interesting is if this one gives 1 to this one, you get 42 here and 52 here, which that's important. They're both important numbers. Obviously, I've talked about 42, but 52 is 2, but I don't really understand why yet. I think it means like oneness, and it's like 10 and 42, which is like oneness and infinity and infinite growth coming after wisdom, essentially. But I'm not saying there isn't more to it, but that's certainly some of it. Be water, my friends. Exactly, Squishy Mirror. Bruce Lee was a genius. Greetings. I'm a big fan of Bruce Lee. Maybe it was Greer I'm thinking of. I have to listen to the podcast again. Crow77. 7. Yeah, let me know. I want to hear about that. I was actually told, someone suggested I go on Crow's show, but I didn't speak to him specifically, but a friend of mine is close friends with him, I guess, and was like, you should go on his show. But I haven't spoken to him about it. That's why it hasn't happened. I mean, I'm not saying it would happen inherently, but it probably would. I mean, just because my friend is close with him. But $165 plus 2 and 2 and 2 and 2. $173. Let's see what 173 is. Is it prime? Exactly, it is prime. Bingo. That's what I was expecting. Cool. Deficiency is 172. 72 is kind of like the number of totality in physics and in metaphysics and in this work. Okay, so 173 is, now we can look at the prime 173 in my models. I do think it's good that I do these working sessions. They're not necessarily as entertaining to everyone, but like this is how I do the work. Like, and I'm getting better at doing it in front of people. Normally it's like very late at night and I'm by myself, and that is still where I find out the most incredible things. But I do find out a lot of things while I'm working on these streams. Like even last night, I was working on prime numbers with you guys, and I saw some amazing like quantities that were too perfect. They were perfectly perfect, I'll put it that way. So we're looking for prime 173. Look at that. Prime 173, guys. As if it couldn't be perfect enough. When starting from 0, which is where you start in this work, because 0 represents infinity, and infinity is a prime structure. It's not a number into itself, but it is a prime structure. It's just a prime quantity, which just, it's like that quantity is growth, never-ending growth. So growth is divisible by 1 and itself. So infinity is divisible by 1 and infinity. Look at what number prime it is when you start from 0. Guys, you're just looking for patterns. Yep, exactly. That's pretty amazing. It's the 42nd prime number. Dope. Dope. I knew it would be something like pretty amazing, but it's always cool when it's that one. Legit. Let's look at all primes together. 3088. That's amazing. I think that's amazing because I need to screenshot this. Because I'm pretty sure that when I was started messing with prime numbers, I realized that the total cycle of 72 in the differences between prime numbers was I think 3088. I think. I'm gonna double check, but like I haven't looked at it in a while, and that would be profound. And then it seemed to end, and other things happened after that I couldn't really explain. But I made this chart according to that difference, that the differences between the first like 3,880th or 3,088th prime number. I think I need to look, but it's on another sheet. I still don't understand this work though, right here. This is the most complicated and possibly the most, I won't say it's the most profound, but it is one of the most profound perspectives on something that I discovered in prime numbers a long time ago. And I posted this on my Instagram, this chart that I have made. And, it's all calculative. And all these differences, basically, like what I saw was this is what I saw, is I looked at the differences between prime numbers, and to a certain, at a certain number, I saw this happen, where I saw 1 and 1, and then 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 31 times, which is fascinating because this aligns with Robert Edward Grant's 31 like rotational symmetry model for predicting or not predicting, it's for perceiving numbers in like decimals in irrational numbers. So it's like if you wanted to know the 10 million and sixth decimal in pi, you would use his 31 rotational symmetry to do it geometrically, and you don't even have to have a calculation happen that requires a bunch of computing power. So basically this is relevant to warp transportation, okay? Because basically you're just bypassing computational power. You don't have to bend the universe in half. You just entangle with where you want to go and go. So that happens 31 times, and then you get 8, which is the periodicity of sentience. And the differences, these are the differences between the differences, and the sum of them is 72. And what's interesting is that when I looked at the differences between the prime numbers, because these differences are the differences between these differences between prime numbers, and these differences between prime numbers come from a specific number of prime numbers, essentially, and I think it was 3088. I gotta double check. Like I said, it was close to it, but when you look at even that, it's 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, goes up by 2, I think, every time here until you reach the end, and then it like jumped up to 72 as a difference, as the next difference. So which the difference was 8 between 72 and 64. Okay, so remember, the universe goes through 720 degrees of rotation, which is 72 is 720, and so 64 being the last before 72, which represents totality or completeness, is interesting because that is the number of gaps in my models, and it's also the number of tetrahedrons in the 64 tetrahedron grid that is the basis of Nassim Harameyn's work. And it's also, in geometric unity, you have 2 sets of 32 particles, and that is obviously also 64. So very relevant. Prime number structure the entire universe. Fascinatingly, to go from 1 and you're getting even 1.33333 repeating, which is basically God is dividing his oneness, putting 1/3 of his energy right here towards creation, but then that's also added to himself. It's not like it shouldn't be 2/3 here and 1/3 here. It should be 1/3, 1 and 1/3 here, because he's essentially adding information, and he's not really taking away information, because he's not taking away from himself. He is putting energy into creation that is his energy, but he still exists as a sovereign entity and isn't really lessened. He's just added to by creation. And you see that in the math here, in the differences between the differences of prime numbers. So basically what's happening is that these are the differences right here between the prime numbers. And when you look, by the way, this is odd, but I think I needed to kind of force this, so I'm not saying that this is completely accurate, but when you basically include everything except 6 here, which is interesting because 6 is the number that you see when 2 consciousnesses are overlapping. Okay, so when you exclude 6 here, and you sum the rest, you get 1, 1, 2, 3, which is the start of the Fibonacci sequence, and it's also found as the start of my universe model, and it's also found in the quantum of consciousness model, and it's everywhere. And so it's, what is 4 plus 7 is 3 is 7. So basically, I think if I do this equals, I think this was the original. This will be able to help me figure out what it was. So, by the way, look at that, 3369. But let's duplicate this because I don't want to screw this up. I posted this to my Instagram, and the caption was, "Some work you must understand in order to. Sometimes you must understand in order to do work, and sometimes you do before you do work, and then, or you must have an understanding before you do the work. Sometimes you do the work and then you form an understanding, and that this was that work where you don't understand what you're doing, and then you have to figure it out afterwards." But I can tell that this is that I stumbled on something very real. So, but if I just do this equals sum of all of that, and I think minus the 72. Oh, great. Equals. I'm just going to do this. I can just highlight. I don't know what I'm doing. Wait. Equals sum. This number is, whoa. That, and this is equal to, yeah, it's 3. And 1171. What is that? 1129. And then okay, so what is 3088 or 3088 equals this divided by 3? Okay, it's 129. 1129. Okay. So it's very close. I need to like dive into this more, but that number 3088 seems, it's very familiar. And it did pop up in this project that I was working on. This was many months ago. This was a year ago, I think, that I did this. And I still don't totally get it, but I do know it's basically showing all the primes in the periodicity of sentience. Look at that. All the gaps is 242, so 242. And then, or 243 if you include one. And then the non-gaps would be, or if you include the gaps, that's just the gaps, let's say. What's happening? 440. Fascinating. But if you include that one, It's like 442. Really, it's like, if you do, this is including it, so, or 441. Interesting. By the way, so there's 36 rows here. If you sum 36, look at what happens. Equals sum. You want to like be mind blown? Look at that. 1 to 36 summed is 666. Fascinating. It's 3 prime numbers multiplied together. 37, 3 times 3, and 2. Look at that. Look at 666. The sum of the prime factors of 666. So the sum of the prime factors of 666 is 42. Dang! Good old 42. Again. Price again. The heck, man. It is the inevitability. Wisdom is inevitable. God will see to it. That's amazing. Because this number represents the Messiah. It's 14 generations, 14 generations, and 14 generations to the Messiah. There's also 42 columns in every single row of a Torah. The Anabakoach, which is the most holy of all prayers in Judaism, is 42 words. And 42 is 2 times 3 times 7 times 1. It's really 1 times 2 times 3 times 7. It's just they're not including 1, but the reality is it's always times 1 as well. So 1 times 2 times 3 times 7 is 42. Okay, so one, 3, 5, 7. What's interesting is that 358 is also the number of the Messiah. And so if you like spin this around and take the beginning and add it to the end, it's 358. And if you add that 7, it's 23, which is also fascinating. 24. That's even more fascinating. We have 23 chromosomes, and 23 chromosomes is a prime number after 19, which is the quantum of consciousness, interior sum, and 23, the sum of all the prime numbers leading up to 23 is 101. Sum of all the prime numbers leading up to 19 is 78, which is interesting because that is the gematria value of Jesus, Jewish, Masonic, Paulina, all these weird, like very relevant, like words in my life all add up to 78 in gematria. Seven plus 8 is 15. Interesting. So 101, which is oneness and infinity, it's two single, separated by, and also linked by infinity. So basically, it's like it's like parent-child linked via the entirety of everything. 28. Oh, this one's fascinating. So they're all fascinating. In relativity 137, which is basically the fine structure constant, is the 33rd prime number. The 42nd prime number in relativity is 181. So 1 and 1, so parent and child separated by 8. Okay, so 8 periods of sentience between existence and the universe. Or God and creation. That's amazing. That one right there. But then in theory of everything space, 173 is the 42nd prime number. But in relativity, 181 is. Fascinating. Okay. Back to what I was working on, and I'm going to take final questions and get out of here by 10. Nice. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Number of qubits in an alleged quantum computer, what, 52? I think that's... Is that what you're referencing, Torin? Because that's what I think it is, too. I think 52 is the number of qubits in a quantum computer. It's relevant to quantum computing. That's what I think the number is related to. But if you think about this, we have 1 and 4 and 9. And then you have oh my gosh. One. And then 4. And then 9. And then we have 162 as the next one. And so the difference between this one and, or the ratio between this one and this one is 18. And I think this should be just 162. And then the difference between that one and that one is 3, 5, 53, and 162. Yep. Basically, you would do this. You'd move that over there, and then you center it. Like I said, formatting is so important. If you don't format in this work, like, you won't see because it's all about structure. I'm going to overlap that. And boom. And okay, so okay, so this is now equal to 400, 225, 1800. And then fascinating. 364 is the average. The count is 8. We add 1. 323 is the average. 2911, is that prime? Probably. Should be. No, it's not. $27.49. That might be it. Is that prime? Yep, it's prime. Okay, I knew it. I knew one of them would be, one of those two would be prime. It just depends on which one was the right way to look at it. And if I was looking at it the right way, it would manifest, I would have assumed it would have manifested prime, because I was assuming the creation of a total consciousness based on what was happening with the math. And that is 21D749. And then we can go to primes and we can look at 27. Um, 49, I think was what it was. That, guys. Oh my god. Guys. $27.49, that prime number. This is basically the where it is in the number prime that it is. It is essentially the 402nd prime, which is like it's 42 divided by infinity, or 0. So weird. It's so weird. It's just so weird. Ugh. It's like if you don't include 0, then it's this one. But the thing is that it's like the 0 that would have preceded it in the beginning of the count has been moved to the center of the number. That's so weird. People that study math in universities these days like don't know this stuff or at all, I don't think. By the way, look at the 432nd prime, so 432, is either 299.999 or 3001, or in relativity, it's 3011. Anyways, what was I? Any final questions, anyone? Hit the like button. You know, again, thanks, Phantom, for the new clip. It's awesome. And thanks to everybody here for tuning in and continuing to tune in. I don't know all of you who choose to listen to this. Kurt from Theories of Everything channel checked in yesterday. I didn't know that he watched this. I knew he was aware of my work because I've spoken to him like in emails about things a few months ago. But I didn't know that he watched any of these streams ever. So I don't know who you are if you don't comment, but I still value you, and I appreciate that you're here and that you find this valuable. So tomorrow at 7 p.m. I will be in the Discord for our live call. If you want to discuss things with me live, that is where you can do it. Thanks for the likes, guys. I just saw that jump up. That's awesome. It really helps with the algorithm. Subscribe to my email list at sentientsingularity.com. At the bottom of the homepage, I will not spam you. You'll only get a welcome email. And also at the bottom of this stream, probably, if not, then the previous stream as well. There should be a link to the Discord that will expire in the next few days, though, so you should jump on it now if you don't, if you haven't joined yet, and then you can participate in the live calls and all the discussions that go on in that Discord. It's growing quickly. There's like a good amount of people on there. I think there's like 70 or something like that, which is pretty awesome. The community is growing. Also, subscribe to Theory of Everyone clips. That is, I didn't make it. I don't run it. But it's just clips of this, these longer streams, and it's awesome because it makes it so that you can share it easier. Also, Phantom, who's usually in the chat, or I think he'll probably be in the chat more often as Theory of Everyone clips, he makes those clips. So if you see a part of one of these streams that you think should be a clip, message me with a timestamp, or message or him at some point somewhere, and let either one of us know, and we can make it into a clip. But I want those clips to be based on mostly what the community finds valuable, not what I'm interested in. I want to see like how the community views it and what resonates with them. So, or what the people watching. So yeah. Anyways, peace, guys. And if I don't speak to you in the Discord tomorrow, Shabbat Shalom. And I'll be back on Tuesday of next week. But I will be either in Clubhouse Monday night or live on Instagram. I'm not sure which one yet. Peace.